Hello and welcome to the roundtable. Well, this week we're discussing something that I think affects almost all of us. That is the state of education during the times of COVID. There are a whole lot of issues that are at stake over here, which were not earlier. Whether it is, what are we going to do with the academic year? Of course, the most basic question is when are schools going to reopen? B, what are we going to do with the academic year? The new year is going to start in June or July, August, depending on where the schools are. How are we going to do with the end of term exams? What about the all important board exams? The other question that is plaguing both the school and the parents is the fee structure. Parents want some waivers. The school says we already have our fixed costs. We have to pay our teachers. How can we give you the waivers? Can the government step in? And of course, the third question is the online education. Is this now a model that is going to be here to stay? These are some of the questions I'm going to be raising with my panel today. Joining me is Pranjal Sharma. He's a public policy expert. He's an economist, and also he's an author of two books, Kanti Nation and India Automated. I'm mentioning these two because especially India Automated, Pranjal, I think is going to be very important in our discussion. Talks about the role of artificial intelligence, the role of machines. You're going to see a whole lot of that happening. I have Rustom Kerawala. He is the chairman of the Ampersand Group. In fact, this group has built about 38 schools under the Vibgyor Group across India. And in fact, I like what he calls himself an edupreneur. I think that's a good way to describe you, Mr. Kerawala. Mansoor Khan, he is a member of the board of management of DPS, Bangalore and Mysore. We have Monica Sagar. She is the principal of the Shiv Nagar School in Gurgaon. And we have Ruchika Bhardwaj. She's the director at DPS Chhatarpur in Madhya Pradesh. Pranjal, I've kind of raised the issues we're going to be talking about, but if you can just put it in perspective for us, and then I'll ask the others to join.
Sure, Priya. I think, we are at a very interesting juncture in education because what we discuss about a hockey stick, online education has been there for a while, but now suddenly there is no other choice but to have online education. So we are going to see a sudden rush towards online education. But I think a couple of things that we need to look at is one, what is the definition of online education? Because sending messages on WhatsApp or sending an email is not exactly online education. So some kind of standards need to be set so that all schools and all boards across the country can come to a common standard, and students and teachers and entrepreneurs as well as the government all have a common platform to deal with. Second, I think it's the difficult balance between the interest of students, parents, and teachers in terms of what the fee issue is, especially around lockdown. It's easy to say, please don't force us to pay, but at the same time, if there is education, it also means that teachers are employed. So I think lockdown and COVID is going to make a very fundamental shift in education. But the question is, how do you regulate it? How do you give it the right direction so that we build a better foundation for the next few years?
In fact, I'm going to speak to first Rustom. How do you see it? Because you've raised issues. I know you've gone to the government. You actually, the Maharashtra, the Nesta has actually gone and met the RBI and asked for some funds. Let's just first talk about the fee structure. How are we going to manage the financial crisis ahead?
Unfortunately, it's a very touchy subject. It's a difficult situation where it's difficult for the parents. At the same time, the schools need to continue functioning. They need to continue supporting the teachers, pay the teachers regularly. So there definitely is a problem. And other than government support, I don't see how one is going to overcome that. I'm personally aware that there would be at least 15 to 20% of our parents that would have lost their job or not have been paid. And at the same time, there is an obligation on the schools to continue paying the teachers. So I think the only way is if the support comes in from outside in some manner or the other, or somebody is willing to accept some kind of deferred payment. I think that's the only way that we can get things going. Other than that, somebody or the other will be left out.
Now, Monica, you're from Delhi, which is Gurgaon, which is nearly part of capital. The Delhi government recently sealed the APJ school. This happened this morning, in fact, as we're talking about, because they hiked their fees and they also insisted the first quarter payments now. Is the government being unfair, or was the school being unfair? And how are you guys? How is the Shiv Nagar school handling this situation?
I think there was a lot of media talk about the fee and a lot of emotions around it. But the court's ruling saying that the teachers have to be paid and the parents have to pay the fee, because online education is not that easy. And in order to pivot to an online education, the teachers need to, their learning curve has been very steep in the last 40 days that the school opened online. And well, the government, I would say, is not totally anti-schools, which is what we were reading first, because with the court's ruling, everyone is also looking at the schools and the teachers, especially, in a very, with a very compassionate view.
We are hoping the government would help you with something, maybe interest-free loans or some kind of a waiver.
We are not really going there as of now. We are, the schools are also seeing how to, prune their budgets, see how maybe have discussions are going on regarding that. They are also seeing how to put a freeze on increments for this year. Like there's going to be no fee increase. Similarly, there'll be no salary increases. So there would be a freeze on increments across the board, most probably.
Okay, that's one way. Ruchika, what are, how are you handling the situation? First, the finances, and then we'll go on. Next round will be an online education.
Yes. So keeping in mind that I represent Central India, semi-rural area, most of our parents are agri-based parents who are dependent on agriculture or that something to do with that line of work. So there are challenges and we are facing those challenges. Our parents, unlike urban area, rural area parents, communication becomes a little more challenged in trying to understand that there are responsibilities that a school has to honor. There are families that we are supporting which live in the same community, but we are trying to educate the parents, trying to talk to parents, counsel parents, through our teachers, through our staff. And like Monica ma'am said, that we are also looking at sustainability within, of pruning our budgets, pruning all the, we've put all the expansion plans on hold. Unfortunately, a lot of extracurricular activities that we had planned for our students, because they come from a rural area. So for us, that is a substantial budget. We are looking at cutting that down to give just basic education at this point of time. So those are the challenges that we are facing in terms of financial. Parents are reluctant. Fees is not coming in very slowly. And we can't force and we can't talk because we understand. We are also compassionate. So we forget the government telling us not to ask, but we understand. We can't keep harping to a parent about this when we know that they can't pay at this point.
Fair enough. That is the problem, Mansoor. Parents, you cannot badger them because they are in a tough situation, but you have your own obligations also.
Yes.
Yeah. I understand the parents are in a tough situation, the country is in a tough situation, schools are in a very tough situation. But the matter of fact is, this is one segment. I personally feel that the governments across the country, let it be the central government or the state government, should take keen interest, because this has been a sector which I personally feel the private unaided schools have been a little neglected by the governments in this crisis. Because this finally, once the crisis is, at the time of when the crisis is going on, or even when it's over, this crisis will continue in the private unaided sector. First being how we will be able to meet the challenges what the schools are going through now. For example, a teacher sitting at home and working today online and trying to get education to the child is at the forefront of this COVID war we are going on. Because each and every day the teacher is spending a lot of time relearning, trying to get used to it. And she has lost a classroom where she had a personal interaction with the child. Now you are trying to have a virtual interaction with the child. And there are a lot of challenges. Challenges like, again, keeping the concentration levels of the child, the infrastructure, the connectivity, because suddenly we've been thrown into a area where though we may have the technology, the platforms for online classes, but still our basic IT infrastructure, right? A teacher may not have that infrastructure at home. As schools, we need to create that proper infrastructure to deliver what we want online. And again, going through further what happens even when we are in a position to open, if and when we are in a position to open the school, we have to be COVID prepared. The schools have an additional cost of making sure tomorrow we don't know the government policy, what will it be for schools, how the social distancing will happen, how the sanitation will happen in the school, how we
How
will
many
keep the
kids
children.
in a classroom? Yeah.
Yeah, communicate. See, once you say social distancing, usually under the RT, we say 40 per class, but most of the private schools follow 30, 35. And once you say social distancing, it becomes two classes. If a class of 30, 35 becomes two classes, then where will you again go for additional teachers? So all these have to be factored in. So this is an ongoing process. And what has actually happened, the governments also should help the private unaided sector and not take knee-jerk actions where it puts a lot of, we are nearly around 20% of the schools in India imparting 40% of the education in the private unaided sector. So the governments should.
I'll just get transparent. The aid is something that everybody is looking towards. But here is a good question: online education, or Ruchika did, in terms of teachers having face-to-face interaction, these are important issues which online education cannot deliver. Kanjan, I know you're a great favor for technology and automation, but how do we deal with the basics?
Well, Priya, online learning has been there for a while. Most of it was focused on higher education. Some children had been taking, some schools had smart classes where some of the homework was done digitally. But here we are talking about a complete disappearance of a physical classroom, right? Now, when the classroom disappears, the point which was raised earlier, how do you get 40 students to listen to a teacher? The whole way of delivering learning, giving homework, etc., changes completely. So I think the support that the government needs to look at is not just to the schools, but to the parents. So I think partly schools need some support, but parents need to. So for example, education loans has been a concept for a while. Why don't we give for 3 months or 6 months, interest-free loans to parents who can then afford to take that loan and give it on for the schools which are making a huge effort? Because remember, from the parents' perspective, while payment is an issue, but a break in their child's education is a bigger issue. So I think the burden of this has to be equally shared between teachers, government, banking system, schools, and parents. So if that kind of structure can come up, I think it will really help everybody, because in the future, at least schools, I think schools and colleges will be the last to open up in the current COVID crisis, because nobody wants to take a risk with children. And it's not as if children are above the COVID virus. So I think there needs to be a 6-month to a 12-month plan for the government for financial support to A, the parents, and B, the schools.
Rustam, I know financial, you've also asked the RBI for some of the things that Pranjal has mentioned, interest-free loans, etc. But let's now look at the online education system. How do you see that working out? How has it been working out in the last month, for example?
Okay, so online education for the schooling, I think it becomes too broad, because typically a school can get divided into 3 parts. One is pre-primary, primary, and secondary. So as far as pre-primary is concerned, online education has a role, but it's a relatively minimal role. And unfortunately, with online education, a lot of the burden in the current situation is there with the elders in the house, the parents or the grandparents. So because the child on their own is not able to concentrate to that extent. And even the child can never be on their own in totality. So for pre-primary, online education has an absolutely different context as opposed to secondary. I think in secondary, a lot more seriousness is there. The children are old enough to get into it. They have their board exams. They have their aspirations as far as their career is concerned. So online education has a larger role to play as far as the secondary is concerned. And again, the role of the teacher also changes. Especially like Vibgya High has been using the double flip method, where the double flip method, where it starts with the child does his studying on his own, self-studies. He tries out the exercises, the questions, and And then there's an interaction with the teacher where she's able to, where whatever difficulties the students have, and the teacher solves those difficulties, the students then go back again and try to solve those questions. So that's the double system that is there. So there's a lot of self-study involved, and the online really becomes effective over there. Of course, I'm using online in the broader term because there are different versions of that. And for the students in primary, it's again a blend. Little interaction with the teachers. There is a parent involvement also. So it's stage by stage. So the unfortunate part is schools as a whole cannot be categorized in one block. You'd have to break the students up in different sets based on their age, and plan the online program or the blended program accordingly.
Okay,
So,
yeah, I'll just bring you in terms of what he's saying is, if we do it age-wise, so the primary and pre-primary is really the biggest focus and concern over here, because you don't really want them to lose a year, but how do we get them involved? So have you come up with some innovative methods? What has the response been in terms of the last one?
So the innovative method that we've come out with is we've scheduled the day, we've scheduled the activities. Fortunately for us, we followed a scripted curriculum. So we have minute-to-minute detailed instructions on what is to be done, when it is to be done. So as far as like for pre-primary is concerned, I would say a lot of the online education is more for the parents. A lot of the interaction is with the parents. So in a typical, for a normal school, for the pre-primary, they would have a 3-hour, 3.5-hour session. Over here, with the parents, the student, the session is limited to approximately 20 minutes.
Okay.
But subsequently,
also on this, the innovative bit. I think there's a little problem with the audio also. So Monica, how is Shiv Nadar School handling this?
Yeah, I would agree with Rustom that we need to look at the school in terms of, I would say, 4 cohorts: the early years, the primary, the middle, and the senior. Online education in middle and senior, we were already doing an ongoing flip model, where the children would do a lot of pre-learning. They would go through a lot of content and then come and discuss it in class. Like some modules were done in the flip, and that is really helping us. We had also introduced, Apple Classrooms last year, and a lot of apps which those teachers have been trained on are really making classrooms more engaging, even online, because there is a lot more collaboration, a lot more interactivity. Yes, the most challenging is the early years, and and also in the early years, the parent becomes part of the classroom. So there is actually a lot of collaboration between the parent and the teacher, because to keep the child engaged and learning is an uphill task. So we have concentrated more on lending a little structure to the day for the child, so that there is a regular 1.5 hour engagement with breaks in between, because the child cannot concentrate for so long. So there are breaks. The children, the teachers are, telling them after 20 minutes to go wash their hands, and how to wash their hands by singing the happy birthday song. They're also teaching them how to do palming, the palming technique to rest their eyes. So some skills are being given. Storytelling sessions are happening with a little bit of literacy and numeracy being woven in, and connect with the parents is there to prepare some material for the class, which has to be prepared at home and then brought in. Because with nursery, they've just come into the school. They don't have a connect with the teachers at all. They don't know the friends. So other classes are still okay. They know each other. Nursery is where we are having a problem. So we've concentrated on, I would say, structure, lending a little bit of continuity from day to day, and building a connect with the children. We've kept these 3, variables in mind, and the lessons are revolving around that. We've got about a 1.5 hour engagement with short breaks in between.
So Ruchika, here's where you come in, because you are different from, your situation, as you said, is largely rural, and parents' involvement, I think, would be, again, there would be a problem also in terms of how much the parents can be involved, how equipped are they to be involved also. So for you, the situation is a whole lot different. How are you managing it?
So Priya, when we were thrown into this situation, we had 3 very, very glaring challenges in front of us. The first one was technology with parents, and parents' apprehension to share technology with their kids, because the belief is don't give the phone so early, they should not be online so much, their eyes. And then typically in a rural household, there are on an average 6 to 7 people living under the same roof of 3 generations. So there are viewpoints shared by each generation. So that was something that was really took us a long while to break through that communication. Then there was, talking about a domain that we were thrown in where our students became our teacher. They knew more about this than we did. So we were learning continuously from them. And we also, with time now, there are discipline issues. There are issues that have come up about online hygiene. So we have continuously, what we have invested our time and effort is talking about online hygiene to our students, because we feel that they are still not that exposed, or I would like to think like that. But if we counsel them at an early age and we teach them that what is online, what is confidentiality, you don't share your link with other students, you have to, what is the proper way of doing an online class, even getting them to sit in one place in a proper attire was a challenge. Please understand, a household where there's no space, there's not even a privacy of a desk or a room where they can do these classes. So those were our challenges. But as a team with our teachers, continuous, and parents have been extremely supportive. They have been very, very supportive. They are so happy that the learning continues. So that has taken care of some of our challenges. That has been our biggest learning from this, is that, you can adapt. The adaptability has been very fast, both by students and our teachers and our parents. All the stakeholders have adapted very swiftly. But I will say that this is definitely a huge support, online education for us, where students are coming from very far of distance, but we can't take away the human touch to the education. But this will help us in a long way.
Final words to you, Mansoor. I didn't realize you're totally out of time. How would is online here to stay, or it doesn't take away the human touch? I know you're part of the world in technology, you'll be more successful at implementing it, but how are the kids handling it?
Online education, according to me, is here to stay. Though during the COVID time, it may be the only way to impart education. And when better times come in, so we will have to integrate this online, what we've learned now, and in future, maybe we will balance it out, and maybe even in future, a few classes may be held online, even when the human interface comes in and children get back to school. But I think we would have learned by that time the advantages of online education as well. So it will be a balanced approach where we will utilize the best of both worlds.
Thank you. And finally, I think, am I right in assuming that the board exams, whenever they'll be scheduled, should not be a problem, because at least that age group understands, Pranjal, at least they are familiar with the online world, and they've all but prepared for the exam. They all just have to sit and take the exams. So hopefully we won't lose that year, crucial year.
Technology is going to play a huge role. Exam systems, I think, will also be automated in terms of assessment, etc. Performance assessment can get automated, so it can remove some of the burden from teachers, that they can focus more on learning rather than assessment. So I see a completely new landscape emerging in the next few months.
I think our educational system needed that. We need to do assessment for learning rather than assessment of learning. When you do assessment of learning, there's a lot of content there. But when you do assessment for learning, I think there's a lot of skill building happening. So we need to focus more on that.
Fair enough. And there's so many teachers in the room, I guess the last word does go to them. Thank you, Monica, for putting that so well. And all of you for joining us, Ruchita, Prostom, and Mansoor, and of course, Pranjal. I think the biggest step is the building block. And I think the bigger problem of COVID is education. That is the crux of our nation, really. So I hope we're going to have a lot more discussions like this. In fact, we're going to be holding one on maybe college education soon after this. But hope to have you back soon and figure out how things are going. Thank you so much for this. And thank you for watching.
Thank you. Thank you, Priya.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.